So today we are going to look at national tax policy. National tax policy is one of the tripartite arrangements of the Nigerian tax system. And this tripartite arrangement is made up of three: tax laws, tax administration, and tax policy. So we are going to look at tax policy. Ordinarily, tax policy are formal statements issued by either the Ministry of Finance or the Federal Inland Revenue Services to guide practitioners and tax consultants on how to deal with a particular activity or activities in the tax laws and tax administration. I hope that makes sense to you. Now, that is what we call tax policy. Now, what is national tax policy? National tax policy is a formal document that states the core guidelines for development of the Nigerian tax system. It provides a guide on the application of the Nigerian tax laws and the administration. So, national tax policy is a statement that gives the taxpayers and the tax consultant a guide on how a particular activity can be treated, whether that activity is related to tax law or related to tax administration. Recently, after the passage of Finance Act into law, the act never defined significant economic presence. SEP. Now, recently, the Minister of Finance defined the meaning of significant economic presence through the issuance of tax policy. So you see, tax policy provides a guide on how the tax laws and tax administrations are to be interpreted or done by taxpayers, tax officials, and tax consultants. Now, what are the objectives of national tax policy? The objectives are it guides the operation of taxation in Nigeria. It guides the operation of taxation in Nigeria. 2. It specifies the roles and responsibilities of stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? The stakeholders of Nigerian tax system is the federal government. Another stakeholder is the taxpayer. Another stakeholder is the tax officials. Another stakeholder is a tax consultant. Now, you might not know who is a tax official. I will tell you. An employee of Federal Inland Revenue Services or Lagos Internal Revenue Services is an example of tax officials. While tax consultants are the tax practitioners. Like, for example, those working in audit firms, those working in tax firms, those working in law firms, they are the ones we refer to as tax practitioners or consultants. Now, another objective of national tax law policy is it guides the review of the taxation in Nigeria. So through tax policy, we can review a particular law that is not applicable or outdated or vague in meaning. Another one, it specifies the administrative responsibility of the tiers of government. That is to say, who is to collect which tax in the country. We'll look at this subsequently in our classes. See, I must tell you that taxation is a very important course. In fact, tax is one of the departments in the accountancy practices that brings the highest revenue to every firm. So if you are rooted in taxation as a chartered accountant, you'll be hot cake out there. That is that for that. So we have principles underlying national tax policy. Now we are going to look at principles that underlie the issuance of tax policy. Ordinarily, Adam Smith identified canons of taxation. Canons means principles, assumptions, and whatsoever you can think of. One of those is equity. Another principle is fairness. Another principle is flexibility. Another principle is economy. Another principle is simplicity. Another principle is certainty. Another principle is clarity. And the last of it is sustainability. Now, I would explain few, then we'll move on. Just know this because of objective questions in the exam. Okay? Now, equity. Equity. How does tax payment deals with equity? You see, tax must be collected in accordance with the ability to pay. The rich, for example, the rich should pay a higher tax than the poor. That is equity. In fact, the logic behind taxation is to collect money from the rich and use it to finance the poor. I would explain this. The rich earn higher income and they pay taxes on this income that they earn. I hope you understand. And these taxes that they pay, the rich ones pay, it is used to finance UBE, Universal Basic Education, for the primary or basic educations of Nigerian children. So those in the village can now access basic education through the payments for their school fees, teacher salaries, buildings, erections, and all that. So you see, the money we collected from the rich has been used to finance the poor. So ordinarily, some poor people can't afford to send their kids to school. So with the tax collected from the rich, they can now afford to send their children to school. For example, most of us went to universities, especially federal universities. You can see that in the federal universities, we pay school fees as low as 30,000, 40,000, and 50, 60. Now, compare that to our counterparts, the private universities. You see that the private universities pay school fees up to ₦1,000,000 and or less or more. And you see, we are enjoying the taxes that the rich men are paying. That is equity. Fairness. Tax system must be fair. Tax system must be fair to the payer. You understand? Then flexibility. Tax collection procedures must be flexible, whereby a taxpayer or consultant can easily cope. Economy. The money realized from collection of taxation shouldn't be way lower than the cost incurred to collect taxes. So you can try to define the rest. It's simple. There's nothing there. So we'll move on to the next. Taxation as a macroeconomic tool. Now, tax is used as a fiscal tool, to help the government to achieve whatsoever objective they have set. You understand? So we have different objectives that tax can be used to achieve. The first is full employment. Now, when we talk about employment, is relative to all of us. In fact, one of the reasons we are going to school and after school is to be gainfully employed, so that you can be able to take care of your responsibilities and the responsibility of your relatives and dependents. So now, full employment, they said, is a macroeconomic objective. It centers and talks about creating employment for able-bodied men in the country, whereby every active workforce that the country has will be able to be working gainfully. So, how can we use tax to achieve full employment? We can equally decrease the tax rate. If we decrease the tax rate, the income at the disposal of the consumer or taxpayer will increase, and his savings will increase, and his investment will increase, and through this employment can be created. Now let me explain economic realities. Recently, as a result of COVID-19, we went on lockdown. People squandered the money they have saved, and now lockdown is being relaxed bit by bit, and people don't have available cash again to be able to find to buy things. And since they don't have available cash again, company cannot make investments. Therefore, we'll be moving down to economic recession. So, with taxation as a tool, we can create employment. Remember, as I said, the notes will be made available to you at the end of the class, so you can read the note. You can even come back to re-listen the class again. Price stability. What do we mean by price stability? Price stability is a macroeconomic objective that tends to ensure that the purchasing power of the country's currency is reasonably stable. You know, so this will make you not to lose the value of your money in the bank account. Now, how can we use tax to achieve price stability? How? Now, remember, inflation is defined as too much money chasing after small goods. So, where there is too much money in circulation, what the country need to do is to mop up the money in circulation with taxation. How would they do that? They will just increase the tax rates. With increase in tax rates, you have lesser disposal income, and lesser disposal income gives birth to savings, and savings gives birth to investment. So when you have lesser disposal income, you have lesser savings and you have lesser investment. So we have distribution of wealth. Tax is used to distribute wealth. How is that done? The rich people will pay higher tax and will use it to finance the education, the hospital bills, the pipe-borne water, access to good roads of the poor. That is redistribution of income. Economic growth is one of them. Diversification is one of them. Then indirect tax is one of them. So that is that for the objectives. How tax can be used to achieve macroeconomic objective. So we now look at stakeholders and their responsibility. At the inception of the class, I did mention during my explanation the stakeholders and their responsibilities. The first one is government. The second one is taxpayers. The third one is revenue collection agencies. The first one is government. The second one is taxpayers. The third one is revenue collection agencies. These are the stakeholders. But they are not just that. We have tax consultants or practitioners. Are you there? Good. Now, the first one is government. Government professional bodies like CITN, ICANN, you see, then media and other advocacy groups. So these are the revenue collection agencies. So government, how can government help us? How can the government help us? You see, what is the responsibility of government in terms of taxation as a stakeholder? They are to make the laws. They are to what? Issue the national tax policy. They are also to regulate the tax administration. taxpayers. What is the responsibility of taxpayers? To know and understand the relevant tax laws and tax policy and to pay their taxes as and when due. Revenue collection agencies have the responsibility of collecting taxes from taxpayers and regiving same to the accounting same to the federal government or state government as the case may be. Professional bodies. Professional bodies are to certify the level of knowledge required by individual persons from time to time before they can practice as tax practitioners. Media and other advocacy groups. The media will oftentimes write about the tax laws or tax whatsoever, telling government this is appropriate, this is not appropriate, and all that. So the media is the means through which taxpayers, tax practitioners, and professional bodies innovate good ideas that government will implement. So that is that for that about that. So we now have three tiers of government and tax administration. Three tiers of government and tax administration. Three tiers of government and tax administration. Now, the national tax policy will lay emphasis on administration and other things. Now, the administration is based on the three tiers of government, and those three tiers of government is what you know already. One, federal government, state government, and local government. Now, with this said, these are the three tiers of government we have, and they are the ones in charge of tax administration. This has been explained in our previous topic that we did on WhatsApp group chat. So we move down to registration of taxpayers. All taxpayers shall register and issue tax and be issued tax identification number TIN by the tax authorities in Nigeria. The information for the registration of taxpayers shall be obtained from bank verification number, national identity card and number, driver's license, Nigeria Communication Commission, Nigerian Immigration Services, Corporate Affairs, and any other relevant agency. So we now have tax compliance. Now, how do we, as tax practitioners, or tax officials, or government, or professional bodies, as stakeholders, ensure that tax laws or policies are complied with? One, we will embark on public enlightenment. We'll start educating the masses about the relevance of tax. When you pay your tax, you have good rules. When you pay your tax, you have access to pipe-borne water. When you pay your tax, you have access to good healthcare system. When you pay your tax, you have access to good road network system. So when you educate people about the relevance or importance of tax compliance, you see, they will now comply regularly by paying tax. Although it is often said, no one goes to the tax office with smiling face. So that is that, by the way. So we now look at the second one. What can we do to ensure tax compliance? Ensure that self-assessment regime is in operation. What is a self-assessment regime? You can now tax yourself. You fit tax yourself. Once you tax yourself, you pay whatsoever you've taxed yourself for. That is self-assessment regime. We now have rewarding taxpayers that remit their tax without delay. You see, these are the ways we can encourage tax compliance. So we have national tax policy implementation. National tax policy is implemented by the Federal Executive Council. Most of you, if you've been watching news or reading news or listening to radio stations, you would have heard several times when they say Osibanjo or Buhari is presiding over the Federal Executive Council meeting. Now, the Federal Executive Council meeting is comprised of the president, the vice presidents, the ministers. They are the one to articulate whatsoever objective they want to achieve in a particular year. After the articulation, The Minister of Finance, Budget and Economic Planning shall now prepare a budget after he has issued the circular for submission of annual estimate of revenue and expenditure from all the MDAs. Now, the FAC will be the one to ensure that tax policy is implemented. So once they issue tax policy through the Minister of Finance, through the Federal Inland Revenue Services, they will now issue an executive order that everyone must comply with that tax policy. So we have the president, the governors, the legislative will issue law, then the ministry will ensure everyone complies to it. So this is the summary. So in summary, we have discussed everything about national tax policy. We said it is a formal, articulated, documented set of fundamental principles that guide the smooth operation of the tax system in a country. In this regard, tax is a compulsory monetary charge imposed by the government on persons, entities, transactions, or properties to generate revenue. Taxation is a systematic process of collecting tax within a particular location. Then, the national tax policy is set to achieve the following objective. We discussed all this before now. So that is that for today's class. So in our next class in taxation, we shall be looking at the next topic following this. So on this note, I will drop the notes to you people on your WhatsApp group chat. Please endeavor to pay your fee so that from Monday onwards you shall be benefiting from this tutorial at your convenience and the availability of notes and its affordability rate. Thank you for coming and thank you for attending. Do have a nice night.